All right, I am going to speak without slides. I think this is the first time I've done it in 20 years. However, I do have a memory aid. So what I'm going to talk about is, again, something I didn't expect to talk about when I undertook the assignment here, which is sort of a mysterious factor we all need to take into account if we're going to try to measure anything in the internet age. So the internet does a couple of things that we like, but everything's a double-edged sword, right? So one thing that the internet brings inherently is amplification, right? You get a message out there and it can amplify very rapidly. And also persistence. It's very, very difficult to make things disappear off the internet. How many of you have files out there or pictures that you are surprised are still out there? Everybody, right? So this first hit me in 1998, 1999, when the Wakefield paper in Pediatrics came out about vaccines and autism. And the way that that was amplified was amazing. It went from what was a very focused and kind of obscure assertion in a paper that was badly written to being amplified and simplified and turned into a message that to this day still is causing excess deaths, right? That's how persistent it is. There are a whole bunch of other things that have been done, and people will put quasi-scientific information out there in order to validate some good or bad worldview, often bad. One of the examples that was debunked, and there's a lot of debunking that has to go on, right? One was that the Irish came over as slaves, so therefore any African American should just get over it because they're just saying, well, the Irish aren't whining about it. Well, it's okay. Guess what? The Irish didn't come over as slaves. You're lying, and go away. But that is out there, and it continues to be out there, and so you get this false equivalency of point-counterpoint, because each point is equally equivalent and each point is equally amplified. And people can actively maintain that status. But when we start talking about measures in the internet age, I want to talk about something that is actually, I think, very often overlooked and is extremely important, and makes it very, very difficult for organizations like ours to get clean, good science, research, scholarship messages out. This factor affects our metrics, our citations, article discovery, and public awareness of good new scholarship in science. It's huge, it's well-funded, and it's pervasive. And because of this factor, our current era may well become known as information's equivalent to the juicing era in baseball. When home run hitters like Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, and Sammy Sosa hit home runs at such a rate that it distorted the game to such an extent that they've had to go back and expunge the records. Or Lance Armstrong winning the Tour de France 7 times and then getting all his jerseys taken away when they found out he was juicing. Because it was illicit. It was cheating. There was some other factor weighing on the competition that made it illegitimate. Can anyone guess what that factor is? It's the fact that our distributors are no longer trustworthy. So we have information distribution that is no longer trustworthy. When you would ship a journal, when I was a youngin', when you would ship a journal, you would send it in the postal service. You would package it up in a little slim volume and you would mail it. The postman would deliver it intact if the postman was not a klutz, would not insert ads that it thought the recipient might like, would not take out articles that it thought the recipient wouldn't want to read, would not take out ads it thought the recipient wouldn't respond to. It would deliver it intact. Email was fairly similar, and it's interesting to see that email is now being used as evidence against some people who have used this to their advantage. But when you get down to social media, YouTube, and major search engines, they are not neutral distributors of information. Okay? They have not only a thumb on the scale, they are leaning on the scale with every bit of energy they have because they want all the money to run downhill to them. Okay? So their biases have outsized and persistent effects. Farhad Manjoo of the New York Times in an interview said, many of them have the powers that we used to associate with governments. They affect elections, Brexit, Trump, Italy, Germany, tried in France, did it in Sri Lanka, did it in other places. And these are cozy little groups of mostly white males in Silicon Valley doing these things without accountability. Just to give you some context, the US distribution of Facebook is larger than the circulation of all US newspapers combined. So that's what you're up against. When you measure your media and you say, well, look at how many impressions we got in print media or the news media, you're outnumbered. 80% of altmetrics measurements, approximately, come from Twitter activity. And Twitter's not an unbiased distributor of information. Google is basically every journal's dominant search engine source. Social media companies are exploiting outdated legal concepts to protect themselves from accountability. They say that they're platforms, not media companies, yet they publish tons of media. This has to change. They have been tacit participants in the emergence of global terrorism. ISIS would not exist without Facebook and YouTube. It just wouldn't. There wouldn't be no ISIS. They reflect the biases and beliefs about the world that most of us would easily identify as wrong, racist, or sexist, or just inadequate and simple-minded. Their business model favors extreme information because it generates more clicks, which means more ad dollars. That means untrustworthy or shocking information, which is usually misinformation. So as you think about real-world impact, this is a huge factor in correcting what is wrong, because there's always going to be false equivalency as long as there's this biased distribution source out there that is making money off of false equivalency, because that's where they make their money. So until the intermediaries and distributors are made neutral again, so that they serve the content community, they don't serve the advertising community or their own shareholders. They serve the content community, like the postal service, like an email service, or at least behave according to social norms that we would applaud. This problem will be impossible to address. And until then, I'm asserting any metric, citation, or search you run has to be viewed as if it is juiced by some algorithm or the after effect of some algorithm that you don't understand. Thanks.